Hey there. Tonight I want to tell you about a man who stood still and in doing so shook an entire system to its core. It was a humid Friday afternoon in a small southern town. The kind of town where the summer heat hangs heavy and the sidewalks bake like stovetops. Outside a convenience store on Pine Street, yellow tape flapped lazily in the breeze. Squad cars parked haphazardly. Flashing lights. A few curious locals craned their necks from behind makeshift barriers. And there, just beyond the police perimeter, stood a tall, older black man in a charcoal gray windbreaker. Silent, observing. He wasn't filming, he wasn't shouting, he wasn't even holding a phone. He was just standing there. Calm. Composed. Watching. That was enough to make Officer Brody twitch. Brody was new to the force, buzz-cut mirrored sunglasses, and the kind of swagger you get from too many bad cop movies. He approached the man with the aggression of someone desperate to prove something. "You need to move along, sir," he barked. "This is an active investigation." The man didn't flinch, didn't blink, just nodded slowly and stayed right where he was. Brody's jaw clenched. "I said move. Don't make me repeat myself." The man finally spoke, his voice smooth and even. "I'm exactly where I need to be." That set Brody off. "Listen, cuz I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this isn't your corner. Go hand out scratch-offs somewhere else." That line, it was a weapon, wrapped in racism, fired point blank. The man's face didn't change, but a voice crackled through the police radio on Brody's shoulder. "Brody, step away from that man. Now." Confused, Brody tapped his earpiece. "What?" "That's Special Investigator Marcus Hale, Federal Oversight. He's here on a silent review." Silence, not just from Brody, but from everyone within earshot. The man, Marcus Hale, reached into his coat and slowly pulled out a leather badge holder. No rush, no words, just the quiet clink of authority unfolding in front of a stunned rookie. The badge gleamed in the sunlight. Department of Justice. Internal Affairs Division. Brody took a step back. Marcus finally moved. Not away, but forward, toward the scene, past the tape, past the cops. Because he wasn't a bystander. He was the one in charge. And this was just the beginning. What happens next, they never saw coming. The air around Pine Street turned electric. Word traveled fast. Within 20 minutes, the sheriff himself had shown up. Big guy. Cowboy hat. Red face. The kind of handshake that tries to crush your fingers. He approached Marcus with a forced grin and a voice that tried too hard to sound warm. "Mr. Hale," he said, drawing out the syllables. "Didn't expect to see Washington folks all the way out here." Marcus didn't offer a handshake, just raised an eyebrow. "I didn't expect to be greeted by officers mocking civilians and dismissing oversight protocol. Yet here we are." The sheriff cleared his throat. "I'm sure this is all a big misunderstanding. If someone spoke out of turn..." "They didn't speak. They revealed." Marcus walked past him. Each step slow, deliberate. Every officer he passed looked suddenly busy, checking notes, staring at clipboards, anywhere but at the man whose silence now roared louder than sirens. Inside the convenience store, the scene was grim. Blood on the floor, a shattered display rack, and a young man, barely 20, being loaded into a stretcher. Witnesses were still lingering, whispering, recording. A cashier with trembling hands tried to offer her version of the story to an officer who barely wrote anything down. Marcus saw it all. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. Instead, he pulled out a small voice recorder, pressed a button, and simply said, "Beginning oversight review. Incident ID 3482-B. Documenting procedural conduct and potential civil rights violations." He turned to the officer beside him. "Names. I want full names of everyone present during initial response. Body cam footage. Written statements. I want the original dispatch call and the internal call logs." The officer blinked. We Uh, might need time to compile that. Marcus didn't blink. You have an hour. Back outside, Brody stood stiff, arms crossed like a sulking child. The sheriff tried to pull him aside. We'll handle this in-house, he whispered. He doesn't need to know everything. But Marcus was already there. If there's anything to hide, Sheriff, I suggest you tell me now, because I will find it. And I assure you, I don't ask questions. Twice. The sheriff swallowed hard. For the next hour, the small-town police department scrambled. Paperwork appeared from thin air. USB drives with raw footage were handed over like contraband. Whispers of misconduct and panic-fueled mistakes spread like wildfire. Marcus reviewed everything, watched, listened, took notes. When the hour was up, he walked back into the middle of the crime scene and pressed record again. As of this moment, the Department of Justice is launching a formal investigation into procedural misconduct and dereliction of duty by responding officers. Immediate suspension, recommended for Officer Brody and 2 others. Sheriff. Pending internal review. Gasps. One officer dropped his pen, another cursed under his breath. But Marcus Hale, still calm, still quiet. He looked around, and without raising his voice, he said, "Your silence today will echo into every report I file. Choose wisely." Then he walked off. No sirens, no shouts, just the sound of quiet justice making its entrance. And they all knew it wasn't over. 3 weeks later, the sun rose over Pine Street with the weight of reckoning in its rays. The town had gone quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, but the kind that follows a storm that isn't finished yet. The Department of Justice had moved fast, faster than anyone expected. Officer Brody? Suspended without pay, pending termination. The sheriff placed on indefinite leave. Internal Affairs took over precinct operations. And the footage, the footage had leaked. The nation watched as a young man bled, unattended, as officers stood idle, as jokes were cracked while trauma unfolded. And at the center of it all stood Marcus Hale. Aha! He didn't give interviews. He didn't hold press conferences. He just did the work. Behind closed doors, he coordinated with civil rights attorneys, victim advocates, and federal investigators. He sat with the young man's family, heard their pain, promised change. Then one morning, unannounced, he returned to the town hall. He stepped onto the podium of a surprise community meeting. The room fell silent, not out of fear this time, but something closer to awe. He looked around at the sea of uncertain faces and began simply, "Power doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just stands still and waits to be recognized." He spoke of accountability, of dignity, of the kind of justice that wasn't loud, but absolute. Then he dropped the final card. A new community oversight board. Federal backing. Independent auditing. Civilian liaisons. "This isn't just punishment," Marcus said. "This is repair. This is how we rebuild trust. Not with slogans, with structure." The people applauded, some cried, and Officer Brody, he watched from outside. A civilian now, one face in a crowd he once controlled. Marcus descended from the podium, walking past him with the same calm presence he had that first day. Brody opened his mouth. To apologize, to protest, no one knew. But Marcus didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't even look his way, because justice had already spoken. And some things don't deserve a second audience. As he disappeared down the steps and into the bright morning light, the town knew the man who stood still had changed everything. And from that day forward, no one ever underestimated silence again. Good night.